I was born on Coruscant, in the mid-levels where the sun never quite reaches, but the Empire's propaganda hollows glow bright enough to read by. My father worked maintenance on Imperial sensor arrays, the vast networks that monitored hyperspace lanes, tracked rebel movements, cataloged every ship that entered Imperial space. He died when I was 7, crushed between shifting cargo containers on a Star Destroyer docking platform. An accident, they said. Acceptable losses in service to order. My mother took his position. She had his technical aptitude, his steady hands. I inherited both. The academy accepted me at 16, not the prestigious academies that produced officers and strategists, but the Technical Institute on Karita, where they trained the invisible infrastructure of the Empire, the analysts, the technicians, the ones who kept the machine running while others took the glory. I excelled. Numbers made sense to me in ways people never did. Sensor echoes, gravitational distortions, hyperspace wake signatures. I could read them like poetry, find patterns in the chaos of a galaxy at war. My instructors noted my aptitude. By 18, I was assigned to the Imperial Security Bureau's Sector Analysis Division, monitoring the outer rim for rebel activity. I was good at my job. I told myself this mattered. The Empire brought order to a galaxy that had torn itself apart in the Clone Wars. I had seen the hollows from that era, separatist droids slaughtering civilians, Jedi generals leading clone armies in battles that reduced worlds to ash. The Emperor had ended that chaos, had brought peace, stability. If that peace required surveillance, required control, required occasional ruthlessness, well, the alternative was another war. I believed this. I swear to you, I believed it with the certainty of a true believer, the kind of faith that shields you from uncomfortable questions. My workstation was a gray cubicle in a gray building on Coruscant, surrounded by hundreds of others exactly like it. We worked 12-hour shifts, monitoring data streams from thousands of sensor stations across our assigned sectors. Most of what we saw was mundane. Merchant vessels following approved routes, Imperial patrols making their scheduled rounds, the occasional smuggler trying to avoid customs inspections. When we detected anomalies, we flagged them for investigation. Sometimes those investigations led to rebel cells being discovered, their safe houses raided, their agents arrested or killed. I tried not to think about what happened after I submitted my reports. That wasn't my responsibility. I was just analyzing data, just doing my job. I met Davin in the cafeteria on sub-level 43, where ISB technicians took their meal breaks. He worked in communications intercept, 2 divisions over, monitoring encoded transmissions. He had dark eyes that crinkled when he smiled, and a habit of tapping his fingers against his calf cup in complex rhythms when he was thinking. We started taking breaks together. He made jokes about our supervisors, did impressions of the pompous sector officers who sometimes toured our facilities. He made the endless gray days bearable. When he kissed me for the first time in an empty corridor during a shift change, I felt something other than the constant hum of duty and exhaustion. I felt alive. We were careful. Fraternization wasn't officially prohibited, but the ISB didn't encourage personal connections. Connections created vulnerabilities, opportunities for compromise. We kept our relationship quiet, meeting in his small apartment in the mid-levels, cooking simple meals together, pretending for a few hours that we were ordinary people living ordinary lives. He never talked about the transmissions he intercepted, never mentioned the voices he monitored. I never told him about the ships I tracked, the patterns I analyzed. The work stayed at work. We had made that rule early, an unspoken agreement that whatever we did in those gray buildings, it didn't touch what we had together. Everything changed on a nothing day in the 3rd year of my assignment. Standard shift, standard monitoring routines, I was tracking routine traffic through the Quelis sector, my eyes half glazed with the tedium of watching approved vessels follow approved routes. Then the sensors registered something impossible. A hyperspace signature emerging from coordinates where no hyperspace lane existed. Not just off route, emerging from a region where hyperspace travel was mathematically impossible, where gravitational anomalies should have torn any ship to atoms. I ran the data again. The signature persisted, mass approximating a light cruiser, energy readings consistent with a Class 1 hyperdrive, military grade. But the point of origin made no sense. I pulled up gravitational maps of the region. The area was flagged red in the database, a stellar nursery, dense with forming protostars, gravitational forces in constant flux. You couldn't calculate a stable hyperspace course through there. You couldn't navigate it. It was like watching a ship emerge from inside a black hole's event horizon. I should have reported it immediately. Protocol required anomalies to be flagged within 60 seconds of detection. But something made me hesitate. I was curious. In 3 years of monitoring endless sensor data, I had never seen anything truly anomalous, truly impossible. I wanted to understand it first. I began pulling deeper analysis, cross-referencing historical data from that sector, looking for any precedent. The ship was moving now, subluminal drives, heading toward the edge of the stellar nursery, standard Imperial recognition codes. Transponder identified it as the ISS Certainty, a Vindicator-class heavy cruiser assigned to patrol duty in the neighboring sector. I pulled up the Certainty's scheduled patrol route. According to the logs, it should have been 3 sectors away, nowhere near the stellar nursery. I checked fleet deployment records. The Certainty had been on station in its assigned sector 12 hours ago. To reach the position where my sensors detected it, it would have had to traverse the stellar nursery. Impossible. My hands were shaking. I didn't understand why yet, but some instinct was screaming at me. I dug deeper. The Certainty's crew manifest. Standard complement, 430 personnel. Recent commendations for patrol efficiency. Nothing unusual. I pulled communication logs. Standard check-ins with sector command. Regular intervals. Nothing flagged. But when I correlated the comm check-ins with the sensor data, something didn't align. The Certainty had checked in from its assigned sector 37 minutes ago, while simultaneously being detected, emerging from impossible coordinates 3 sectors away. 2 ships, 1 transponder code, 1 ship where it should be, doing what it should do, 1 ship where it couldn't possibly be, having done something impossible. I felt cold. The gray walls of my cubicle suddenly felt very close, the air recycled through too many sets of lungs. I knew I should flag this immediately. Let senior analysts handle it, follow protocol. But that instinct was still screaming. Some part of me understood that the moment I submitted this report, something would change, something I couldn't take back. I compromised with my fear. I sent a standard query to Sector Command, requesting confirmation of the Certainty's current position. While I waited for response, I continued tracking the impossible ship. It was moving with purpose now, accelerating, heading for the edge of Imperial sensor coverage. Its course would take it into deep space, into regions where our monitoring was sparse, where rebel cells operated in the shadows. Sector Command responded within 4 minutes. The Certainty was confirmed on station in its assigned patrol sector. All systems nominal. No deviations from scheduled route. The response was terse, routine, unconcerned. I read it 3 times. Then I looked at my sensors. The impossible ship was still there, still transmitting the Certainty's codes, still doing what couldn't be done. I made a decision. I flagged the anomaly. I submitted my full analysis, including the apparent duplication, the impossible point of origin, the discrepancy between official position and sensor detection. I marked it Priority 2, significant but not urgent. Then I waited. My shift ended. I filed my standard reports, locked my workstation, took the turbo lift down to sub-level 43. Davin was waiting in the cafeteria, as usual. He smiled when he saw me. I kissed him and tasted fear on my own lips and said nothing about impossible ships. The summons came the next morning. Report to Senior Analysis, sub-level 68. I had never been to sub-level 68. My clearance didn't extend that far. They sent an escort. 2 ISB internal security officers, expressionless, silent, descended in a turbo lift that required biometric confirmation at 3 separate checkpoints. The walls down there were whiter than the gray I was used to, the lights harsher, the air colder. I was shown into a conference room where 3 senior analysts waited. I didn't know their names. I didn't want to know their names. They asked me about the anomaly. I explained everything, the impossible coordinates, the duplication, the discrepancies. They listened without expression. When I finished, the eldest of them, a woman with gray hair pulled severely back, eyes like winter ice, asked me a single question. "Did you share this analysis with anyone?" "No," I said. "It's in the system, standard protocol, but I haven't discussed it." "Good," she said, and then, "You have excellent technical skills, analyst. Your pattern recognition is exceptional. However, your conclusions in this case are erroneous. Sensor malfunction, gravitational lensing from the stellar nursery creating false echoes. We've confirmed the certainty's position. There is no duplication. There is no impossible ship. Your analysis is incorrect. Do you understand?" I understood. I understood that I was being told to agree, to accept, to not question. I understood that the woman's eyes held no warmth, no room for argument. I understood that somewhere far above me, decisions had been made, classifications applied, doors closed. I thought about my mother taking my father's position after they crushed him between cargo containers. Acceptable losses. I thought about the gray walls of my cubicle, the steady paycheck, the career I had built. I thought about Davin waiting for me in the cafeteria. "I understand," I said. "Sensor malfunction. My analysis was incorrect." "You're being reassigned," the woman said. "Effective immediately. Different sector, different focus. Your technical skills will be better utilized elsewhere. This incident will not appear in your file. You will not discuss it with colleagues. You will not pursue any further analysis of this matter. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear," I said. They dismissed me. Different escort, different turbo lift, up to a different sublevel. My new workstation was in economic analysis, monitoring trade patterns for signs of rebel financing operations. Safer work, duller work. Work where impossible things didn't happen, where you tracked credit transfers and cargo manifests and pretended the galaxy made sense. I sat at my new gray desk, in my new gray cubicle, and felt something crack inside me. I didn't tell Davin. Not that night, not the next, not ever. What would I say? That I had seen something impossible and been told it didn't exist? That the empire I served, the order we maintained, had looked me in the eye and demanded I deny what I knew to be true. He would have tried to comfort me, would have said the right things, and I would have seen in his eyes that he knew, that he had probably made similar compromises that we all did, that this was the price of serving the machine. I couldn't bear to see that reflected back at me, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. The impossible ship haunted me. In meetings, in the cafeteria, lying awake beside Davin while he slept, I saw it emerging from coordinates where it couldn't be, flying impossible courses, doing impossible things. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was sensor malfunction. Maybe gravitational lensing could create such echoes. Maybe I had misread the data, made mistakes in my analysis, let my desire for something interesting override my judgment. I tried to believe these things. I failed. 3 months after my reassignment, I did something stupid. I accessed the original sensor logs from that day. My clearance didn't extend to my old division anymore, but I knew the systems, knew the security protocols, knew how to navigate the bureaucracy. It took me 4 days of careful, cautious intrusion, burying my access attempts in routine maintenance logs. I was terrified the entire time. ISB internal security monitored everything. If they caught me accessing files outside my authorization, it would mean interrogation, re-education, imprisonment, or worse. But I needed to know. I needed to confirm that I hadn't imagined it, that the impossible ship had been real. The logs were gone, not sealed, not classified, erased. That entire day's sensor data from the Quelli sector wiped clean. Not even backup archives remained. It was thorough, professional deletion, the kind that required senior authorization, the kind that told you something was important enough to eliminate from Imperial records entirely. I sat at my workstation, hands trembling, and understood. The ship had been real. The impossibility had been real, and someone, some authority high enough to order complete data deletion, to silence senior analysts, to reassign technicians who asked questions, wanted it erased, wanted it forgotten, wanted everyone who had seen it to doubt their own eyes. The empire I served, the order I maintained, was lying. Not about small things, not about acceptable spin on uncomfortable truths, but about fundamental reality, about what was possible and what wasn't, about what existed and what didn't. I logged out. I filed my standard reports on trade pattern analysis. I went through the motions of my job with mechanical precision. And at night, lying beside Davin, I stared at the ceiling and felt the foundation of my beliefs crumble. I started noticing other things. Small inconsistencies, gaps in records, reports that didn't quite align with official narratives. Once you saw one lie, you started seeing them everywhere. The Empire's grip on truth wasn't as absolute as I had believed. They controlled the broad strokes, the major propaganda, the public narrative. But in the details, in the technical records, in the places where people like me worked, there were cracks, mistakes, things that didn't add up. I began keeping notes. Nothing overt, nothing that could be called sedition, just personal observations, questions without answers, anomalies that couldn't be explained by official stories. I kept them encrypted on a data chip hidden in my apartment, updated them weekly. I told myself I was just being thorough, just maintaining intellectual honesty. I didn't admit to myself what I was really doing, building evidence. Against what? I didn't yet know. The Battle of Yavin changed everything. When news came through that the Death Star had been destroyed by rebel fighters, the entire ISB complex went into lockdown. Emergency protocols, all-hands analysis of the disaster. How had the rebels obtained the station's schematics? How had they identified the vulnerability? How had a handful of starfighters penetrated the Empire's most powerful weapon? The official line, quickly disseminated, was that the station had been lost to a tragic accident, a reactor malfunction. The rebel involvement was minimized, downplayed, rationalized. But I saw the raw intelligence reports before they were sanitized. I read the intercepts from the battle, the sensor data, the survivor testimonies. The Death Star had been destroyed by a precise strike on a thermal exhaust port. The rebels had indeed obtained complete technical readouts, and the kill shot, the impossible torpedo run through a narrow trench under withering fire, the precise targeting of a 2-meter-wide exhaust port, had been fired by a pilot using no targeting computer, just instinct, or something else, something the reports mentioned in whispers, the Force. I thought about the impossible ship. I thought about emergence from coordinates where emergence was impossible. I thought about the Force, that mystical energy the Jedi had once wielded, that Darth Vader supposedly commanded, that the Emperor had nearly exterminated from the galaxy. What if the impossible ship hadn't been a malfunction? What if it had been something else? Someone using capabilities we didn't understand, couldn't predict, couldn't track with all our sensors and surveillance. The thought terrified me. If the Force was real, not primitive superstition as Imperial doctrine claimed, but an actual power that could bend reality, then what else was real? What else had we been lied to about? The Jedi Purge, Order 66, the fall of the Republic. What if the official narrative was propaganda, careful construction designed to justify the Empire's existence? I started researching, carefully, using my economic analysis access to justify database queries that skated close to forbidden topics, trade records from worlds where Jedi had been killed, financial transactions related to the Jedi Temple's seizure, cargo manifests from the period immediately after the Clone Wars, when the Empire was consolidating power. I buried my searches in legitimate work, made them look routine, held my breath every time I accessed potentially flagged data. What I found disturbed me. In the official history, the Jedi had betrayed the Republic, attempted to assassinate the Chancellor, forced him to defend himself, and transform the Republic into the Empire for security. But the records I accessed, dry financial data, cargo manifests, construction schedules, told a different story. The Jedi Temple had been converted into the Imperial Palace with remarkable speed, as if the renovation plans had been prepared in advance. The logistics for deploying clone troopers across the galaxy to execute Order 66 had been established months before the supposed Jedi betrayal. Everything pointed to preparation, to a plan implemented, not to a desperate defensive response. The Empire had been constructed on a lie. The fundamental justification for its existence, protection against Jedi treachery, was manufactured. I sat in my gray cubicle, monitoring trade patterns, and felt my entire worldview invert. Everything I had believed, everything I had built my identity on, was false. I wasn't maintaining order against chaos. I was enabling tyranny, and I was complicit. Every report I filed, every anomaly I flagged, every pattern I identified, I was helping the Empire maintain its grip, locate its enemies, crush its opposition. How many rebels had been captured because of my analysis? How many agents arrested, cells destroyed, because I was good at my job? I thought about the sensor data I had tracked, the movement patterns I had identified, the predictive models I had built, efficient tools for hunting people whose only crime was opposing tyranny. I started making mistakes, not obvious ones, subtle errors in analysis, patterns I failed to notice, reports that took slightly longer to file, giving their subjects a few extra hours to move, to disappear, to survive. Nothing that could be definitively called sabotage. Just a gradual decline in efficiency, the kind that could be attributed to stress, fatigue, the grinding monotony of the work. My supervisors noted it. I received a warning about maintaining performance standards. I apologized, promised to improve, continued my careful incompetence. Davin noticed something was wrong. He asked me about it one night in his apartment after I had been particularly distant, particularly silent. "You're different," he said. "Ever since the reassignment, you don't talk about work anymore. You barely talk at all. What happened?" I wanted to tell him. I wanted to confess everything, the impossible ship, the erased data, the web of lies I had uncovered, the sabotage I was committing. But I looked at his concerned face, his loyal eyes, and I knew he wouldn't understand. He was still a true believer, still thought we were the good ones maintaining order, protecting civilization. If I told him what I knew, what I suspected, he would have to choose between me and his career, between truth and comfortable certainty. I couldn't put that on him, and I couldn't trust him not to turn me in. "Just tired," I said. "Sorry. Bad week." He accepted it, or pretended to. We went through the motions of our relationship, but something had broken between us. Some essential intimacy was gone. I was keeping secrets, and secrets poison love. I saw him less frequently, made excuses, let the connection wither. It was kinder than forcing him to choose. I was alone, sitting at my workstation, surrounded by hundreds of other technicians, and completely alone. I knew truths I couldn't speak. I was betraying an empire I no longer believed in, while serving it with the appearance of loyalty. I was trapped in a nightmare of my own complicity, unable to escape without exposing myself to re-education or execution. Then the sensor data came through about Hoth. The Empire had discovered a rebel base on an ice world in the Anowat sector. Fleet elements were being mobilized for assault. The data came through my division because of the economic analysis. Massive logistics operation, supply chains activating, military expenditures spiking. I was assigned to track resource allocation for the operation. I read the intelligence briefings. The rebels had established a major base on Hoth, Echo Base, underground facilities, significant personnel and equipment. The Empire was sending overwhelming force. Lord Vader himself would lead the assault. It would be a slaughter. The rebels would be crushed, their leadership captured or killed, their alliance broken. I sat at my workstation and made a choice. I copied the operational data. Not everything. I didn't have access to everything, but the timeline, the fleet composition, the approach vectors. Enough to give warning, enough to save lives. I encrypted it, compressed it, stored it on a data chip so small I could hide it under my tongue. Getting it out of the facility was terrifying. ISB complexes had multiple security screenings, biometric scans, metal detectors, random data storage searches. I had seen technicians arrested for attempting to smuggle out classified information. The punishment was re-education at best, summary execution at worst. But I thought about the rebels on Hoth, about the families and idealists and soldiers who would die if I did nothing. I thought about the impossible ship and the erased data, and the lie my entire life had been built on. I swallowed the data chip and walked through security with my heart hammering against my ribs. They didn't catch me. Random chance. I wasn't selected for additional screening. I walked out into the Coruscant evening with treason hidden inside my body and felt something like purpose for the first time in months. Finding a rebel contact was harder. I didn't know any rebels. I didn't frequent dissident hangouts, didn't have connections to underground networks. I was a mid-level ISB technician who had spent her entire life serving the system. But I knew how to analyze data, identify patterns. I started watching people who frequented certain cantinas, certain districts where ISB surveillance was lighter. I looked for patterns, people who traveled frequently but never appeared in Imperial commercial records, who used cash instead of registered credits, who met in changing locations with varying companions. Eventually, I identified someone who looked promising, a cargo hauler who moved through Coruscant's lower levels with suspicious efficiency. I followed him for 3 days. On the 4th, I approached him in a dim cantina, slid into the booth across from him and said quietly, "I have information about an Imperial assault on a rebel base. Tell me how to pass it along and I'll disappear from your life forever." He studied me for a long moment. Then he gave me a frequency, a specific time, a location in the lower levels where communication intercept was minimal. "Transmit there," he said, "one time, then destroy your equipment and never use that frequency again. And if you're ISB bait, if this is a sting operation, they'll find your body in a recycling chute." "Understood," I said. I transmitted the data 2 days before the assault on Hoth. a brief burst transmission, compressed, encrypted using protocols I had learned in ISB training. Everything I had about the operation timeline and fleet composition. Then I destroyed the transmitter, crushed it to components, scattered the pieces in different trash processors across 3 districts, and I waited to see if I would be arrested. Days passed. The assault on Hoth proceeded. News came through ISB channels. The rebel base had been evacuated before the main assault began. The rebels had escaped. Lord Vader was reportedly furious. There were investigations into potential intelligence leaks, security reviews, interrogations of personnel with access to operational data. I sat at my workstation with my hands steady and my face calm and waited for them to come for me. They never did. The investigation found nothing, or found the wrong people. Someone else was blamed. Someone else was re-educated. I had been careful enough, lucky enough, to escape notice, but I knew the truth. I had saved them, not all of them. There were casualties in the evacuation, rear guard actions, delaying forces who sacrificed themselves so others could escape. But the majority had survived because of the warning I provided, because I had committed treason. I felt no guilt. That surprised me. I had betrayed my oath, violated my duty, aided enemies of the state. By every measure I had been raised with, I should have felt shame. Instead, I felt clean. For the first time in years, I felt like I was on the right side of something. I became more careful, more systematic. I looked for opportunities, operations I could sabotage with subtle inefficiency, intelligence I could delay or muddy, data I could gently corrupt. Never enough to be obvious, never enough to draw investigation, just a constant small drag on the Empire's efficiency, death by 1,000 tiny cuts. I made contact with the rebel network, through dead drops, through intermediaries, through careful anonymous communication. I passed information when I could, warned of operations, identified vulnerabilities. I became a source. They gave me a code name, Fracture. I don't know if they ever knew my real name. I preferred it that way. The person I had been, the loyal Imperial analyst, was someone else. Fracture was who I chose to be. The Battle of Endor arrived with shocking speed. One day the Emperor was invincible, eternal. The next day he was dead. The Death Star destroyed. Vader dead. The command structure of the Empire shattered. The news came through official channels as propaganda at first. Minor setback, tactical withdrawal, the rebels' desperation producing a lucky strike. But those of us who knew how to read between the lines, who had access to actual intelligence, we saw the truth. The Empire had been decapitated. The supposedly invincible weapon destroyed again. The rebels had won. The ISB complex descended into chaos. Some analysts fled. Some doubled down on loyalty to the remaining Imperial command. Some, like me, simply waited to see what would happen. Would the rebellion hunt us down? Would we face war crimes tribunals? Would they execute everyone who had served the intelligence apparatus? They didn't. When New Republic security forces arrived to take control of Imperial intelligence facilities, they were surprisingly restrained. They arrested senior leadership, detained those with clear evidence of war crimes, and offered the rest of us a choice. Cooperate with the transition, provide information about Imperial operations, and receive immunity, or face prosecution for crimes committed in service to tyranny. I cooperated. I told them everything about the impossible ship and the erased data, about the network of lies embedded in Imperial records, about the surveillance systems, the tracking methods, the predictive algorithms we had used to hunt rebels, about the information I had passed, the operations I had sabotaged. I confessed my complicity and my resistance. I held nothing back. They recorded everything. Multiple interviews, multiple debriefings. intelligence officers who looked at me with expressions I couldn't quite read, neither forgiveness nor condemnation, just careful assessment. When they finished, they told me I wouldn't face prosecution. My work as fracture was valuable. My cooperation was appreciated. I was free to go. Free to go where? What do you do when the structure you spent your life serving collapses, when the certainty you built your identity on dissolves? I walked out of the ISB complex into a Coruscant that looked the same but felt entirely different. The Empire's propaganda hollows were gone, replaced with new Republic broadcasts. The stormtrooper patrols had disappeared. The surveillance systems I had spent years analyzing were being dismantled. The machine I had served and betrayed was being torn apart. I found Davin in a cantina in the mid-levels, drinking alone. He looked older than he should have, worn down by the sudden collapse of everything he believed. He saw me approach, and his expression flickered through several emotions: surprise, pain, something like recognition. "I heard rumors," he said, "that someone in economic analysis was passing information to the rebels. I didn't want to believe it was you." "It was me," I said. I sat across from him the way I had years before when we were younger, and everything seemed simpler. "I'm sorry. I couldn't tell you. I couldn't put that on you." He laughed, bitter and broken. "You thought I'd turn you in, that I'd choose the Empire over you." "Wouldn't you have?" He didn't answer immediately. He stared into his drink, fingers tapping that familiar complex rhythm against the glass. "I don't know," he said finally. "I believed in it so much. The order, the stability. I told myself the cost was acceptable. But when it fell, when I saw what we had been part of, what we had enabled, I didn't know what to believe anymore." "I saw an impossible ship," I said. "It emerged from coordinates where nothing should be able to exist. They told me it was a sensor malfunction. They erased the data. They reassigned me, and I knew. I knew that if they would lie about something that meaningless, they would lie about everything." "An impossible ship," Davin repeated. "Is that what it took? For you to see the truth?" "Yes," I said. "One impossible thing, and after that, I couldn't stop seeing the cracks." He nodded slowly. "I wish I had been braver. I wish I had questioned more. I wish I had been like you." "I wasn't brave," I told him. "I was just angry and scared, and I couldn't live with what I knew." We sat in silence for a while. Then Davin said, "What will you do now?" "I don't know. Find some new job, some new life. Try to forget." "Can you forget?" "No," I admitted. "No, I don't think I can." We never saw each other again after that night. Some connections, once broken, can't be repaired. Too much had happened. Too much had changed. We were different people than we had been when we kissed in empty corridors and pretended the work didn't matter. I left Coruscant. Too many memories, too many ghosts. I found work on a New Republic analysis team, tracking Imperial remnants, helping with the transition. It was familiar work, patterns, data, systems analysis, but for a different purpose. Now, when I flagged anomalies, I wasn't hunting people who opposed tyranny. I was helping dismantle what remained of it, but I thought about the impossible ship. I still think about it. The New Republic analysts dismissed it when I mentioned it. Just another Imperial security paranoia, probably nothing, but I couldn't let it go. I used my access to dig through recovered Imperial records, looking for any reference to unexplained phenomena, impossible sensor readings, ships appearing where they shouldn't. I found scattered references, not many. Most had been erased or classified beyond reach, but fragments remained. A transport emerging from a black hole, a fighter appearing behind enemy lines with no hyperspace signature, a capital ship vanishing from sensors mid-battle. All dismissed as malfunctions, all investigated and sealed. But I saw the pattern. The Empire had encountered things it couldn't explain, couldn't control, couldn't fit into its ordered universe. And rather than admit there were powers beyond its understanding, it had simply declared those things impossible and erased them from record. What if the Force was only part of it? What if there were other things, other capabilities, other technologies, other powers that existed in the margins of known space? What if the galaxy was stranger and more complex than either Empire or Republic admitted? The impossible ship might have been a Force user, or it might have been something else entirely. Some technology we didn't understand, some species with capabilities beyond human comprehension, some fundamental aspect of reality that our sensors and theories couldn't capture. I spent years searching, looking through recovered Imperial databases and interviewing former Imperial personnel, chasing leads that went nowhere. The New Republic humored me. They thought I was chasing ghosts, working through trauma, trying to make sense of the senseless. Maybe they were right, but I needed to know. I needed to prove that what I saw was real, that the moment when my certainty shattered had been justified by truth, not just paranoia. I never found proof, not the kind that would satisfy skeptics, but I found enough fragments, enough whispers, enough patterns to convince myself. The impossible ship had been real, and it meant the galaxy was bigger, stranger, more mysterious than anyone acknowledged. There were cracks in reality, places where the rules broke down, moments when impossible things happened, and I hope, that those impossible things were often good. That people escaping from tyranny, evading Imperial censors, surviving against overwhelming odds, they sometimes got help from forces we didn't understand. That the universe itself bent occasionally toward justice, toward hope, toward survival against darkness. Maybe that's naive. Maybe I'm projecting meaning onto random quantum fluctuations and sensor noise. But when I lie awake at night, when I remember those years serving the machine, enabling its cruelty through my competent analysis, I need to believe that something fought back, something made the impossible possible, something gave hope when hope should have died. I'm old now. The New Republic has given way to new conflicts, new challenges. The galaxy never stops being complicated. But I did my part. I saw the lie at the heart of the Empire, and I resisted it. Not effectively, not heroically. I was just one technician making small sabotages, passing occasional intelligence. But it was something. It mattered. Maybe it saved some lives. Maybe it made a difference. When I die, and that day is coming sooner than I'd like to admit, I will die knowing I saw something impossible. That I lived in a galaxy stranger and more wonderful than the Empire's propaganda could contain. That there are cracks in certainty, moments when reality bends, times when the impossible becomes real. And I will die knowing I chose. When faced with comfortable lies or uncomfortable truths, I chose truth. When faced with complicity or resistance, I chose resistance. Not perfectly, not soon enough, but eventually, when it mattered, I chose. That's all any of us can do. See the impossible, question the certain. Choose to act when action costs something. Make the galaxy a little less orderly and a little more free. The impossible ship is still out there somewhere. I believe that. Doing impossible things, carrying people to safety through routes that shouldn't exist, breaking the rules that tyrants use to maintain control, being proof that the universe is bigger than anyone's attempt to contain it. I saw it once. For a few hours before they erased it from the records and reassigned me to economic analysis and told me to doubt my own eyes. And that was enough. One impossible thing to break my certainty forever, to set me free. The truth. I spent my life analyzing patterns, tracking movements, making sense of chaos through data and logic. But the most important thing I ever saw couldn't be analyzed, made no sense, violated every rule I knew. The impossible ship taught me that reality is larger than our understanding, that there are forces in this galaxy that refuse to be tracked or controlled or explained away. The Empire tried to erase it, but it existed, just like hope exists even when tyrants try to eliminate it, just like resistance exists even inside the machine itself. I was complicit in tyranny for too long, but I saw the impossible and it saved me, not completely, not enough. But it gave me the courage to choose truth over comfort, resistance over complicity. That choice doesn't redeem me, but it means I died as someone who tried. In a galaxy as strange and terrible and wonderful as ours, sometimes trying is enough.